Breaststroke is a difficult stroke to help swimmers go fast in. Everything has to be happening at the right time and in the right way, or the whole stroke falls apart. One of those key elements is breathing. If swimmers aren't breathing in the right way, at the right time, at the right speed, it's going to be really difficult for them to go fast. And unfortunately, just telling them to breathe faster or lower doesn't actually work very well. So in this video, I'm going to show you strategies that you can use to help your swimmers improve their breaststroke breathing. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. Today, we're going to talk everything breaststroke breathing, from why it matters, to what swimmers have to do, to what it looks like, to what you can do to help your swimmers improve their breaststroke, as well as a couple sets that show you these ideas in action. With that, let's dive in. So why does breathing matter in breaststroke? We've got three big reasons. First of all is resistance. So the breath is going to move swimmers out of alignment. When they go up with the upper body, the lower body can tend to sink, and that's going to mean more resistance. And the more they move out of alignment, the more resistance is going to create it. And that's just like putting on the brakes. And so if swimmers are coming up really high and their hips are dropping really low, that means they're going to create a ton of resistance, and that means they're going to lose a lot of speed. The second is tempo. So faster stroke rates can allow swimmers to go faster, and if their breath is taking more time than it should because they're moving more than they should, or they're getting stuck in a certain position, that means their stroke rate is going to be lower. So the more time they take, the slower the stroke rate. And when swimmers are trying to go fast, that can create a lot of problems because it becomes really difficult to swim at higher stroke rates when the breath is holding them up. And what some swimmers will do is they know they instinctively have to keep the stroke rate up, so they shortchange other important aspects of the stroke cycle to make up for the excessive length of the breath. So not only are they sometimes slowing their stroke rate down, they're actually compromising more effective and more important aspects of the stroke cycle in order to try to keep the stroke rate up. Lastly, it can affect timing. And so breaststroke is all about timing and rhythm. But if there's one part of the stroke that's taking more time than it should, or putting swimmers in positions where they're unable to swim with great timing or rhythm, that's going to really mess things up. And when their timing is off, their rhythm is off, they're going to swim slower, and it's going to be a lot more difficult. And that means they're going to get tired faster, which means they swim even slower. So for all these reasons, improving the breath is really critical in breaststroke. And for some, it can be the key to unlocking more speed. So what is effective breaststroke breathing? There's two aspects of it. One is the breath itself, so coming up out of alignment, and that's what we're going to talk about here. And the second one, which we'll talk about next, is coming back down after the breath, getting back into alignment. So the goal with the breath itself is to breathe without disrupting the alignment of the hips. So if swimmers are moving through the water, if they can breathe in a way that gets the upper body up without letting the hips drop, that's going to be effective. So if they can breathe like that, that's good. If they're breathing like that, that's not so good. So they have to try to find a way to get a breath without disrupting alignment of the hips. And one way to do that is to really focus on breathing with the body. So during the pull, the upper body is necessarily going to come up. And so swimmers want to time that breath so the head's going to be in position to get a great breath as the body rises. If they try to do that earlier or later, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get the breath and to get an effective breath without disrupting the alignment of the hips. A second key skill is focusing on breathing forward. And doing so makes it a lot easier to maintain alignment while getting that breath. So if swimmers think about coming up, that's more likely to drop the hips down. If they think about coming forwards, they're a lot more likely to keep everything in line, maintain their alignment, and get a breath that moves them down the pool. The last piece is trying to optimize breath height. And so they're trying to maximize the pull while minimizing the hip drop. And so if the hips are dropping a ton, they're probably going to want to breathe less. So if their hips are dropping, they probably want to breathe lower. On the other hand, staying really low can compromise the effectiveness of the pull because rising up allows swimmers to create a lot of propulsion with the upper body. It allows them to get more leverage on the water. And so if they're swimming super flat, it's going to be tough to do that. So they want to come up enough that they can get more out of the pull, but not too much so that the hips drop. And so that's the challenge here, is finding the sweet spot. Now, after swimmers breathe, they got to get back into position. So how they do that has a big influence on the effectiveness of the breath and how fast they're ultimately going to be able to swim. So the goal is to get out of negative positions, positions that are causing them to slow down, as fast as possible. So what is that like? So when their head's up, there's more pressure on the hips to go down, and they're kind of bulldozing through the water. So they need to get out of that position as fast as they can, and they want to get back into a horizontal position. So the way to think about doing that is kind of like a seesaw. So when they're level in the water, when the head comes up, the hips tend to go down. And so they want to press on the fingertip side of the seesaw to get everything back in line. So if they think about driving everything forward and down, that's more likely to work that seesaw, press down the front end, and get the back end back up into alignment. So the breath shouldn't just be a lowering of the head, it should be an aggressive recovery both forwards and down so that they can get everything back in line. So swimmers can also pair the recovery of the breath with the recovery of the arms. The more violent that is, the more aggressive that is, the easier it's going to be to get the hips back up in line. If everything comes down nice and patiently, you're probably not going to get as much pressure. If things come back fast and really pop the hips up to the surface, they're going to be able to get back in line more effectively, and they're going to be able to get back in line faster. So the more aggressive they can be with the head recovery, the almost violent they can be with the head recovery and the arm recovery, the faster they're going to be able to pop everything back into place. And that becomes extremely important when trying to swim fast over short distances where swimmers do have to get back into alignment, but they have to do so without sacrificing the stroke rate. So let's check out what that looks like. So we'll take a look at it underwater so you can see an impact of the breath and the recovery on the position of the hips. So this swimmer, if you watch his hips here, they don't drop when he takes that breath, they just move forward in the water, which is what we're looking for. The other aspect you can see is he's breathing as the upper body rises. Then after he takes that breath, you're going to see the hands move forward fast. So right there, you can see how aggressive they were in those two frames. And then he's going to drive the head and the chest back down. And let's watch what the hips do. They get back up into alignment, and they're right where they need to be. If we go back, you can see that the hips haven't dropped much, but they do drop a little bit. And then after that recovery, they pop right back up to the surface, and everything is back into alignment after that breath. And what's important is this was a 100-meter race in a major championships, and I believe it was a world record, and he's still getting back into alignment after that breath after each stroke. So even at really high stroke rates, it's critical to get back after the breath into alignment after every stroke. So we'll watch again here. So as the body starts to rise, that's where the breath comes. He does it without dropping the hips hardly at all. And then a really fast and aggressive recovery of the hands and the head. And he's back in line and the hips pop up back to the surface. So he's breathing in a way that allows him to keep his hips up at the surface and get a great pull. And then after the breath, he's recovering fast and aggressively to get back into alignment as soon as he can without sacrificing the stroke rate. So we'll watch another swimmer here, same thing. So again, the head comes up as the body is rising. She takes her pull. Watch the hips there. They haven't really dropped much at all. And then aggressive recovery with the head and the hands. You can see how fast the hands move forwards right there. And you can see how fast right there she gets that head back down into the water. She's slamming it down. She's not being patient with it. She's getting really aggressive. And as a result, right there, the hips pop back up just a touch. If they've lost any height, they get back into position. So right there, and she's ready to go. And again, this is a major championship race, I believe over 100 meters. If it wasn't a world record, it was awfully close. And she's still getting back into alignment each stroke. So the way she's making that happen, like right here, is she's breathing in a way that doesn't result in much loss of alignment. And then after the breath, she's getting back into a position by aggressively recovering and doing a great job of getting back into alignment as fast as she can by using the arms and the head to throw everything back into the water to get the hips back up to the surface. So if we watch the swimmers here, we can see the aggressiveness of the recovery, how they move everything forward fast, they move the head forward fast, and they really try to get back into alignment as quickly as they can. And when they breathe, you can see that the breath itself is even forwards. They're not just coming up, they're coming forwards with the breath, and they're recovering forwards, and they're getting everything back down in alignment really quickly. And you can see that even the hips pop up a little bit after that recovery on the left. And then on the right there, this is a 50-meter world championship race, and they're being really aggressive with getting back into alignment so that they can maintain their high stroke rate without sacrificing the alignment that they have and the amount of resistance they have as they move through the water. So they have to be really aggressive with breathing forward and then recovering that breath really fast and really aggressively to get everything back in line to maintain their speed. So we've talked about why the breath matters, and we've talked about what swimmers need to do in order to execute an effective breath. So what's the challenge? What makes it difficult to help swimmers learn to breathe effectively? First of all, it's going to be different for every swimmer. Their lower body is going to be shaped differently. It's going to have different lengths. It's going to have different weights. And their upper body is going to have different lengths, it's going to have different weights, it's going to have a different shape. So we talked about that teeter-totter earlier. It's going to work a little bit differently depending on the structure of the swimmer. Some swimmers may have to come up higher, some swimmers may have to come up lower, and some swimmers may have to compensate more for coming up higher or lower. Everything's going to be a little bit different for each swimmer, even if they're trying to follow and achieve the same principles. So while it would be nice to have one breathing solution that applies to everyone, even though we have basic principles, we don't have a specific way that each breaststroker should swim. And if you're not convinced of that, just watch a major championship final in breaststroke and you're going to see 8 totally different breaststrokes, and they're all going to be really effective at a world-class level. Another challenge with improving breathing, especially in breaststroke, is that everything affects everything in the stroke. Learning effective breathing can be tough with the rest of the stroke, because if one thing's off, like we talked about earlier, the whole stroke doesn't necessarily work, or it can just feel really terrible. So if swimmers are trying to figure out different ways of breathing, they may not be paying attention to the other important aspects of the stroke, and the whole thing can kind of fall apart, and it's difficult to learn in that context. So that's a challenge that's particularly specific to breaststroke, because in order to work on the stroke as a whole, everything has to be working well, and it's hard to make everything work well when you're focused on one particular aspect. Another challenge with breaststroke breathing is the precision involved. Swimmers have to find just the right height, they have to do it at just the right time, and they got to recover in just the right way. And as we mentioned, that precision is going to be a little bit different for each swimmer, and if it's off just a little bit, it can really affect the stroke. And I'm sure you've seen when breaststrokers kind of lose their stroke and they can't get it back, and the performance impact is obvious. Well, breathing can play a big role in that as well. Last challenge is, for all these reasons, you can't necessarily teach it. Because of the different shapes and sizes of swimmers, you don't know exactly how they should breathe, and you don't know exactly how they should return the breath. And because of the precision involved, it's tough to be able to see those slight differences and see those slight changes and see the impact of them. It's going to be difficult to tell a swimmer to breathe 1 inch lower or to angle their body at 5 degrees less or more. That's not going to be something that swimmers can really understand. And further, it's not something that you're probably even going to be able to see. And I'll speak for myself, I can't see that type of stuff. So to overcome these challenges, we need solutions that make them irrelevant. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So to help swimmers improve their breaststroke breathing, we need to find solutions that allow them to find the optimal breath for them. They need to figure out the right time to breathe, and they need to figure out the right way to breathe. And because we can't necessarily know exactly what's going to be perfect for them, the way to address that problem is to do everything we can to put them in situations where they can start to feel and figure out what's going to be the best breath for them. So we're going to go over 2 exercise strategies that can help them do so. We're going to go over 2 training aid solutions that can be really helpful. And then we're going to go over some performance solutions to help put pressure on them to figure out the best ways for them to move through the water. So the most important solution, and my favorite one, is varying the breath. So because we can't know what perfect breathing is going to be for any swimmer, rather than trying to do it perfectly, we're going to try to do it in every way possible so that they get exposed to tons of different breathing patterns. Then they can learn all the different options, they can feel the impact of those different options, then they can select the best option, which allows them to move through the water with the least effort and the most speed. And importantly, it's not necessarily a conscious process, they're just going to naturally gravitate towards whatever is going to be the most effective. And part of that process is driven by performance goals, which is what we're going to talk about later. Again, they're not really thinking through, this is exactly how I should breathe. But by providing them with lots of input, lots of different information, they start to figure out what's going to be the most effective way to breathe that allows them to move through the water as fast as possible. So we have a few different ways that they can breathe. 1, they can not breathe, they keep their head down throughout the whole stroke cycle. 2, they can breathe normally. 3, they can breathe with their head up, so they're just swimming and they're not letting their head drop at all. They can also think about looking down when they breathe, and they can think about looking forward when they breathe. Those are the different ways that they can execute a breath. And then by varying those options and then combining those options in different ways, we have an unlimited number of variations and alternations that we can use. So for instance, they can alternate between head down and regular breathing, or head down and head up breathing. They can switch that every stroke cycle. They can switch that lap by lap. They can use all sorts of different variations, and you're only limited by your creativity. The goal here is to help them explore all the different breathing patterns so they can start to figure out what's going to help them go fast. You can also change the kick, so you can use flutter kick, dolphin kick, or breaststroke kick. That will allow them to get a different feel for the breath. And like we talked about earlier, the timing issue can be a real challenge. So by using flutter and dolphin kick, we can kind of eliminate that timing challenge so they can just focus on the breath, they can just focus on moving forward, and they don't have to figure out how to make sure the kick is working with all of that. And again, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the key aspect too is to make sure that they're asked to perform. So they're trying to go faster with head up breaststroke, for instance, or they're trying to go faster with head down breaststroke, for instance, or they're trying to go faster alternating between head down and head up. And they're going to try to find the best ways to do that and perform while using those different variations. And the more they learn to perform with these different breathing patterns, the more effective they're going to be with all breathing patterns. Just to show you what it looks like, here's breaststroke without breathing. So they're just focused on keeping the head as low as they can. Obviously it's going to rise up a little bit, and that's fine, but they're trying to minimize the amount of up and down motion, the amount that the head is coming up out of the water. Now, more or less the opposite of that is head up breaststroke. So they're swimming with their head up, and that's going to help them be more aware of what's happening with their hips, because as you can see here, his hips are going to ride pretty low no matter what he tries to do, and that can help him feel the impact of having the head up while he swims. This particular version can be really useful for helping swimmers learn to recover the hands quickly, because there tends to be an abbreviated pull, and they can literally see how fast they're moving their arms over the surface of the water. Last variation we'll take a look at is alternating between keeping the head down and breathing normally. The goal here is to feel the difference between the two breathing patterns, and by doing it every other stroke and then asking them to perform it that way, they're going to try to figure out exactly what they need to do to keep everything moving forward regardless of the breathing pattern. Next option is to resist the recoveries, specifically the arm recoveries. So poor arm recoveries slow the breath recovery. If the swimmers are getting stuck here, they can't get back with the heads because the hands are still in the way. So one way to draw attention to that is to resist the recoveries. So you can put drag socks on the elbow, you can put drag socks on the wrist, you can have it hanging over the elbow or hanging over the wrist, or you can bunch it up and just have it be like almost a wristband and then a elbow band there too. And what you're going to do is it requires them to recover with intent. They've got that extra resistance, and if they're not being really aggressive, they're just going to totally get stuck. And so to even make their stroke work at all, they have to be really aggressive with getting the arms recovered and getting the arms recovered fast. For swimmers that tend to put not much effort in the recovery, or they just don't really understand how important it is, this can help get their attention and force them to be more aggressive with the arm recoveries. So improving the arm recoveries is a really important aspect of the breath recovery, because the arms need to get out of the way so that the head and the body can come back down. Now, not everyone has drag socks, and so for plan B, what you can do is go head up breaststroke with dolphin kick or a flutter kick, and then have them go fast. So because the head's going to be up, they're going to have to really be super aggressive, and you can have them watch the arms and be really aggressive with those recoveries. And by having them do it with dolphin kick and flutter kick, it tends to speed up the stroke rate. And you can add fins if you wanted to, and that's going to really encourage them and force them to recover fast. Of course, you can do head up breaststroke with dolphin kick and flutter kick and use the drag socks to resist the recoveries, which can make it even more effective. The main idea is challenge them to recover the arms fast so that they can get back into alignment faster with the arms, which means they can get back into alignment faster with the head. And the faster everything moves forward, as we talked about, that's going to get that seesaw rolling, and that's going to get everything back into alignment fast. The faster that happens, the sooner they can take the next stroke without disrupting alignment, and the faster their stroke rate's going to be, the faster they're going to go. From more of a general strategy perspective, you can add resistance. So resistance is going to slow them down, and they're going to have to work harder to get back into alignment. Generally speaking, it's going to pull the hips down, and it's going to make it harder to get back into alignment and get the hips back up. So swimmers are going to have to work really hard, similar to what we did with the resisted arm recoveries. They're going to have to work really hard to get back into position with each stroke. And when we're using different breathing patterns, that's going to challenge them further. So they're going to have to figure out how to make that happen with the resistance and with different breathing patterns. So similarly, the resistance tends to pull the hips out of position, so they're going to have to work harder to stay in line. They're going to have to work harder to get back in line. So it takes the basic challenge present with using different breathing patterns, and then it magnifies it because of the added resistance. And so you can use a weight belt, which is definitely going to pull the hips down. You can use a parachute, which really tends to pull the hips down. And then you can use the cord and the pulleys, which, because the resistance tends to be on the pool deck, is not going to pull their hips down quite as much, but it is going to make it more difficult for them to manage their position, and it's going to do so in a slightly different way, which, as we talked about, variation can be really useful for that purpose. So varying the breathing and then also challenging the recoveries can be made even more effective by adding different types of resistance, making it more difficult to both stay in line and get back in line after every breath. And that extra challenge can help them learn how to be more effective with each breath. Another strategy you can use to challenge the same activities is training aids. And so two in particular that I think are really useful. One is hold tennis balls. And the reason you want to do that, you use a tennis ball, close their fist, you can't use the hand, and now they have to use the forearm. But more importantly, the hands are really used to kind of lift the body to breathe effectively. But if they don't have the hands, they're going to have to figure out how to use the torso, how to manipulate and control the torso without relying only on the hands. to get the body into position. So they're going to have to really use their torso to get where they want to be and how they want to breathe. So that's an extra challenge regardless of the breathing pattern they're going to use. They're going to have to figure out how to breathe effectively without using the hands to move themselves in position. Then of course, once they get the hands back, it's going to be even easier to do so. Second, you can have them use fins. And so when they're using fins, everything happens faster. They need to be more precise with the breathing. They need to be more aggressive with the breathing, because if they don't, they're going to miss that timing window because everything needs to happen faster. Secondly, because they're moving faster through the water, the consequences of poor breathing are going to be more obvious. If they're coming up high and they're getting stuck in that position, they're really going to feel it. And if they don't do a good job of coming back out of that breath, they're also going to feel it because they're going to feel all that resistance they're creating when they're not in alignment in the front of the stroke. So fins can be really useful for practicing these skills at faster speeds, where swimmers have to execute faster, and the consequences of not executing are going to be more obvious. All the solutions we've discussed so far become even more effective when we ask for performance. And so you always want to ask for performance regardless of what you're doing. And it could be stroke counts, it could be stroke rates, it can be speed, or some combination. And they don't have to necessarily ask for maximal effort or maximal output. You just want to have them have a goal of some sort to challenge them to perform at higher levels. And so there's two basic ways you can do that. You can have them use the sensory activities, the solutions we've talked about, and then perform. So for instance, they go 425s head up breaststroke plus flutter kick to help them feel that different breathing pattern. And then they go right into 425s breaststroke, minimized stroke count and time, where they're trying to perform. Or you can have them perform during those sensory activities as well. So 425s breaststroke, they're going to alternate head up and then no air by stroke. So they go one stroke head up, one stroke head down. And on those, they're going to minimize stroke count and time as well. Then they go right into 425s, minimize stroke count and time. So in the first case, we're helping them feel something different, and then they perform. In the second case, we're having them perform while they use a different strategy and then perform while swimming regular breaststroke. By using the different performance strategies, we're not just suggesting that they pay attention or suggesting that they try to find new solutions, we're requiring them to. If they're trying to go faster, if they're trying to hit different stroke counts, if they're trying to hit different stroke rates, they're necessarily going to swim differently, and we want to use that to encourage them to explore how they're breathing and also find the ways that are most effective at producing performance. Regardless of what they're doing, they're going to get more out of it when there's performance expectations. All right, so what does this actually look like when it comes down to sets? This is more of a skill set. We're going to go 2 rounds through it. They're going to go 325s, 325s, and 225s, and then 325s, 325s, and 225s. They're going to go through that 2 total rounds. You can certainly do this with or without resistance or with different types of resistance. So they're going to go 325s breaststroke with a parachute. They're taking as few strokes as possible. No air, breathe every other stroke, and number 3 is regular. And then they're going to go 325s breaststroke with a parachute, build a strong, no air, breathe every other stroke, and regular. And then they're going to go 225s breaststroke. Number 1 is breathe every other stroke. Number 2 is regular. The second half is going to be the same as the first half. The only difference is the first half is focused more on the low aspect of the breath, so they're not breathing often. And then on the second half, we're focusing on having a really high breath with the head up position. So number 1 is head up, number 2 is head up every other stroke, number 3 is regular, and then the last 2 are head up every other stroke, and the last one is regular. So we've got stroke count expectations here. We've got speed expectations here. We're using resistance, and we're varying the breathing pattern in lots of different ways to help them explore how to go fast, how to figure it out, how to stay long, regardless of the breathing pattern. And the resistance, the parachute, adds an extra challenge and will give them more feedback about what they're doing and how they're swimming. So it's a great way to challenge swimmers to figure out how to breathe effectively by showing them and asking them to breathe in different ways. And then I'm asking them to perform regardless of the breathing pattern or how they're swimming. Next set has a little bit more of an endurance focus. They're going to go 4 rounds through. They're going to go a 75 with flutter kick, and then a 75 with dolphin kick, and then a 50 breaststroke to finish. So the 75s are always going to be 25 alternate head up and regular, 25 breathe every other stroke, so head down and regular, and then 25 breaststroke. And then the 50 is always the same stroke count each 50, and they're going to descend the whole thing 1 to 4 by round. So they're having to perform with different kicks, they're having to perform with different breathing patterns, and then they're going to put it all together with regular breaststroke. So the idea here is to figure out how to swim faster and faster, regardless of the breathing pattern and regardless of the kicking pattern. The more effective they can be in any of these variations, the more effective they're going to be in all these variations. The better they can get at swimming fast, regardless of the breathing pattern, the more likely it is they're going to be able to execute with the right breathing pattern when it really matters. And we're helping them build the endurance to execute well, regardless of the breathing pattern. Last set is more of a speed set. They're going to go 3 rounds through. They're going to go 8 times 6 cycles fast breaststroke with 100 stroke rate. So whatever their stroke rate is for 100, that's what they're going to use. They're going to go odds, dolphin kick, evens, or breaststroke kick. They're going to alternate with 2 with drag socks on the elbow and then 2 with drag socks on the wrist. And so the challenge there is they have to hit 100 stroke rate even though they have that extra resistance. So they're going to have to be really aggressive with the recoveries of both the arms and the breath. They're going to have to work to get back into alignment fast. Next, they're going to go 25 head up breaststroke with flutter kick, and that's fast. So they're going to have to be really aggressive with the arm recoveries. Then they're going into 25 breaststroke fast where they try to put everything together. So this aspect, we're really working on getting back into alignment fast, working on the recovery of the breath as opposed to the breath itself. And they have to be really good with recovering the arms fast, getting the head back down in alignment fast so that they can swim fast. So breaststroke breathing is a really critical skill. Unfortunately, it's not one where we can just tell swimmers exactly what to do. So we have to put them in situations. Where they can figure out the most effective breathing pattern for them. That's going to come from using different variations of breathing, using different variations of kicking, and then really challenging that with resistance, with fins, with tennis balls, and then asking them to perform. By using those solutions, you can help your swimmers breathe more effectively. And if you want to learn more about effective breathing and how it influences alignment in the water, check out the video below.